Welcome back to the Mountain Morning Show's continuing live coverage of the Sundance Film Festival. Now, of course, we all know the importance that music plays in a film, and I'm thrilled to be joined with the group from the BMI Snowball Roundtable, BMI's VP of Film, TV, and Visual Media Relations, Doreen Ringer-Ross, and then composer Jeff Beal and director Jon Shenk. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
So first, for people who may not be familiar, talk to me about the role of BMI with Sundance in that partnership.
Well, BMI, just so people know, is a performing rights organization, and we represent film composers and songwriters and music publishers, and we go out and license the users of music, who are primarily the broadcasters, radio, television, cable, internet, and through a very elaborate accounting and distribution system, pay that back out to the creators of music, who are people like Jeff and other composers, songwriters, and music publishers. In the midst of that, there's this whole artist development level, this whole artist relations level that people like me are involved in, where we are really concerned with doing artist development work for the people we represent. So years ago, we got involved with the Sundance Institute because their mission statement was very akin to what I'm talking about when I say artist development. And in the 80s, we got involved in supporting their composers lab. And when Peter Golub took it over, I think about 17 years ago now, we got involved as a primary sponsor of that. And since it's my passion, I got deeply involved in helping form it. And it's just grown to be the most exquisite lab where composers and filmmakers actually work together, which is not anything that happens in film school or in film scoring programs. They never get that interaction. So that's sort of our pride and joy, is our relationship with Sundance and the lab that we do. Jeff has been at the lab many times as an advisor, and he's fabulous. And some of the composers that have gone through the lab are actually participating in this roundtable that we're doing tomorrow, which is really carrying the agenda of that lab forward into this festival, where we support all of the composers that we have that have scored films that are in the festival, that are at the festival, and we put them together and have this great conversation about that creative process. Because I often do panels that are called, music, the bastard child of post-production. Can I say that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Just did, yeah.
But it's true, because it's always that thing that's left at the end of production that runs out of money, that ends up being underfunded, and nobody knows how to actually deal with it. So this is just one of those great opportunities where we get to address that, and Jeff's so great at it.
Absolutely. And Jon, I want to turn to you quickly, because I know that one of the most anticipated films at this year's festival was Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth sequel. You were, of course, the director of that piece. And I want to talk about your inspiration and what you were looking for in terms of the musical collaboration with the film.
Well, this film, the sequel to An Inconvenient Truth, Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power, really stands on the shoulder of the original film. And what we were able to do 10 years later is tell the drama that's going on in the world between the vested interests and the kind of fossil fuel industry that want to keep, business as usual and keep doing the stuff that got us into the mess that we're in terms of the climate crisis. And on the other hand, the alternative energy sustainability revolution that's going on. And there's just this incredible drama going on. And of course, our leading man, Al Gore, is navigating this world in just this incredibly dramatic way. And the film, as Jeff knows, really has kind of, more of like a typical feature film like drama to it. It has incredible low lows where you're just looking at just the horrible stuff that's going on with the climate. It's really just bleak and depressing when you go to the places in the world where you see evidence now of climate change. On the other hand, there's an incredible hope in the film with what very likely will become a decision that we make as a global civilization to move towards a different way of powering our world and our economy. And so to work with Jeff is just sort of a dream come true, because he is just a master at that whole range of emotion that happens in a film. And we really wanted an unusual score. We wanted a score that really help the audience feel the anxiety that is going on with the climate crisis, but also lift them back up and help them understand that there's incredible hope as well. So when Jeff accepted our request to work with him, it was just a dream come true.
One of my favorite quotes is Hans Christian Andersen's when he says, "When words fail, music speaks." And I think especially with this climate change subject, sometimes words just seem to fail how, I'm going to say important, this topic is. How did you approach the inspiration for a project like this?
Yeah, well, I do think you look for a way in. You know, you look for an emotional connection to an audience. That's why we put music in movies. And you know, it's funny because when I first met with Jon and his wife Bonnie, who co-directed this movie, I mentioned another documentary I had here at the festival years ago, Blackfish, which had a huge effect, and that really made me an optimist about the power of film and the power of emoting in film. You know, there's a heartbreaking scene in that movie when a baby whale is taken away from his mother.
Yes.
And I always thought maybe I went too far, but then when I realized how much that film had an effect on people,
it required that.
Yeah, and similarly in our movie, there's some beautiful moments. You know, one of my favorite images and emotion in the movie is when, you know, Al talks about this beautiful picture that he had in his office. It was the first photograph of the Earth. And I wrote this thing, and it's funny, my wife, after she saw the screening on Friday with me, she said, it's almost like you wrote a love song to the Earth, and that's exactly what it is. You want to get this sense of ownership of our planet that transcends politics, that transcends economics. That's what motivates you to change and really make a decision that can actually move things forward. So, you know, I love what you said, though. That quote is beautiful. I think about it in my feature film work, too. Actors are fascinating to watch, and it's usually not what they're saying, it's what's happening that's nonverbal. That's sometimes the most powerful moments in a film.
Absolutely. And Doreen, you touched on the fact that sometimes music and score can be an afterthought in production. Well, clearly, it can be some of the most powerful parts of the picture. Speaking to the roundtable discussion that you'll be having with the panel, what are some of the things that you discuss when you start the project, you know, so the preemptive discussion rather than the post-production discussion?
Well, the very thing that Jeff is talking about, we talk about the range of emotions. We talk about, I think, you know, it's pretty typical, and we certainly did in this film, to talk about themes for characters. We had a leading man in this film. He had a theme that kind of evolves over the course of the film. It's as important as the quote-unquote screenplay, although there's not a screenplay in a documentary. There is a narrative arc of drama that occurs, and of course the music has to be in line with that. In Bonnie and my work, we've always been kind of on the sort of subtle end of storytelling. We don't like to beat people over the head, and sometimes music can be bombastic, and there's a fine line where you don't want to have the audience feel like they're being manipulated by the music, but you want to sort of dovetail with the emotion of the film so that it kind of enhances the experience for the audience almost at a subconscious level. And that's what Jeff and great composers do, is they figure out a way kind of almost like in a dreamlike way, sort of, you know, to sort of get beyond the sort of conscious mind into the subconscious and sort of help them feel the depth of the emotion that's going on screen.
I think also we try to unveil the communication process between composers and directors, because often at this festival you're dealing with films where you have first-time filmmakers, and you know, trying to find that language is part of the foundation of that relationship. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, I describe it as a series of dates. You know, you're always on your best behavior in the first date.
Sure.
But I often tell young composers, it's that second date after you've sent maybe the filmmaker some music and they've had some comments, that's when you really get your hands dirty. Because it's not, being a good composer is not just about writing a good piece of music, it's being a collaborator.
Sure.
Right.
So it's really listening to what the film is telling you, also listening to what they're telling you, and figuring out how to decipher. You know, often some of the best direction is not, a director, you're usually better served if a director gives you adjectives as opposed to trying to tell you what to do musically.
Okay.
It's kind of the composer's job to take those adjectives, take those feelings, and to translate them through their musical voice.
And it's not a clean process.
No.
Jeff might write a piece of music, we use it, it might work for kind of a rough stage of the film, but as you go on and you realize how it connects to another scene in the film, you might have to throw that original piece away and write something that, you know, that connects to the new through line that we've developed in the editing process. And God knows editing documentaries is a very messy process. You're
Yes.
kind of building the film in the edit room. And so Jeff, you know, kind of the plastic way he's able to work with, you know, how about sort of throw stuff at the wall, how about this, how about that, and then you sort of end up finding a road that works and you navigate down that.
Well, and I think so many people, when they think of musical scores, like you said, some of those bombastic moments, maybe the classic John Williams, you know, you can just identify it like that. But some of the most powerful, especially with documentaries, you almost don't even hear it. It just sort of sneaks in and you feel it as the film comes on, and it matches so beautifully with what you're visually seeing on screen.
Yeah.
When you do the discussion with young composers, what are some of the, I don't want to say advice, but some of the points that you try and guide them in the right direction?
I personally tell them to be authentic. You know, I think that especially developing composers are always trying to be lovable, you know, and be what's coveted. And so we'll all get these demos of, here's my best version of John Williams, and that's just so not what people want. They're looking for original voices.
There is only one John Williams.
And a lot of
And just
imitations.
leave,
But
yes.
but the point is you need to find that voice as a composer, and you need to learn to have the confidence to express it. At the same time, you need to listen to your director and be flexible and not precious about what you've created in case it's really just not working as well as something else.
I had a really kind of funny experience on this movie, which I hope to share at the panel tomorrow, because we had a wonderful editor on this film. And also what will happen is while they're making film, they'll put in what's called temporary music. And Don, he picked like the best, you know, I've been around a while, you know, I've been doing this for over 20 years. This temp track was the most terrifying thing I've ever had, because he had picked all of the best pieces from 20 years, and I had to sort of figure out, I was competing with a younger version of myself. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so
You had experience on your side.
I guess I did, yeah. But you know, but that's actually what you do is you find ways to talk, and one of the ways you do talk, like John said, you throw things up there, and temp music's really useful because it gives you something to talk about.
But then it can become a trap too, because creatively it
Do I
kind
have
of
to stay in
limits
this
where
lane?
you go with
What's
your
the
original
expectation?
idea.
What's the original idea? What's the surprise? I'm really into surprises, you know. I come from a jazz background, and I love the idea of like not knowing what I'm going to do and really figuring out, let the film speak to me and figure out what that zone is. I think that's where the magic happens. You know, you can't plan it. It's a product of all of the things coming together. You know, I think one of the nice things about this movie, you know, John was also the cinematographer on it, and I think documentaries, you know, have really come of age as films. I think some of the most interesting filmmaking that's happening right now is in documentaries, and so I think music has sort of followed suit. We're sort of serving that really much more sophisticated way of storytelling that's evolved.
Yeah. And in terms of talking to young composers, I think it's what's happened in feature films has happened also in documentaries, which is you have these kind of moments where a composer like John Williams will come along and everything will sound like him for the next 10 years or longer. In documentary, that happened with Philip Glass in the 80s and early 90s. He composed music for some very high-profile documentaries, and for a long time, all documentaries sounded like that.
Had to be in that lane.
And that's why we were thrilled to work with Jeff, and there's other young composers out there that also have original voices. When you find something that doesn't sound like anything else but still works in this magnificent way, and it's surprising and it allows you to, you know, sort of helps you feel this range of emotion, it's just a magical combination that it can't be beat.
Well, this BMI panel sounds like it's going to be absolutely fascinating. How lucky for young people to be able to experience this and ask questions and find inspiration. Personally, I would just like to thank the two of you for creating the Inconvenient Truth sequel and getting that out there. I am very thrilled to have you all here, and enjoy Sundance.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right,
Thanks
we're
for
going to
having
take
us.
a quick break here on the Mountain Morning Show. We'll be back with much more, including in the next hour in the can right after this.